Okay, in this video we're going to solve the homework problem with Python lists, and I'm just going to read some of it here briefly. Write a program to ask the user to input 10 integers from the keyboard. As the numbers are read in, put them into a list. Start with an empty list and then add elements to it. Write functions for finding the minimum on the list, the maximum, the sum, and the average. Okay. So the first thing we have to do is we have to input 10 numbers from the keyboard, and there's more than one way to do that. I can do a loop, and I can ask for a number. So n equals int of so I prompt them for a number. It's going to be a string. I have to convert it into an integer. And then after I convert it into an integer, I need to put it into a list. So let's have a list called numbers, and we'll initialize it to an empty list before we start our loop. Okay. And then every time I read a number, I want to add that. Oops, wrong key. Let's try that again. Okay. And then when I fall out of the loop, let's see if it's working. So let's print numbers. Okay. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to call this list algorithms. And then I'm going to run it. And here's my input window down here. I'm going to do a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 5 and a 6 and a 7, 8, 9, 10 should be my last pass through the loop. And it is creating a list of integers for me with all the numbers that I typed in. So that's one way to do it. In talking with some students, there are some other ways to do it. Let me comment that out for a minute. And let's try another way. Let's try reading them all in as one. So I'll do n equals input, enter 10 numbers. And so I'm asking them to do it all on one line. I should probably say something there about separated by spaces. If I start putting commas or something in, then it starts getting a little bit uglier. But I'm trying to keep this relatively short, so we'll keep it to a short prompt. Okay, so this will be completed when they've entered 10 numbers. Now, let's just print out what we get for n. When we're done with this, let's go ahead and run it. And so they're all on the same line now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and hit enter. And what I'm getting is a string of numbers. It's not printing out the apostrophes for me. I kind of wish it would, but it's not printing out the apostrophes. If I was in interactive mode, it would print out the apostrophes for me. So, but I'm just getting a string. One string. Not 10 of them, it's one string, its name is n. So if I enter them that way, I need to be able to split that string up. So there is a very nice split command that will take a string and split it on the spaces that are separating the items in the string. So if I do, I can just put it right back in n. It's going to change what n is, but n equals n dot split, and then I'm going to print n again. Okay. Now if I do that, what split does is it'll take this. It will split the string into a string with a value 1, a string with a value 2, a string with a value 3, and so on. And when I run this one now, and let's just tell it to do that. And I hope I don't have to answer that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Enter. And so it split up the strings. It does show the apostrophes now, so I know that this is a list of strings, not a list of integers. But I'm going to be doing minimums and maximums and adding them up and finding their average. And these need to be numbers. Okay? So after I split them, I've got a choice here. What I can do is I can step through the entire list and replace each item with its integer equivalent. Now, in order to do that, I've got to have a loop. And I'm going to put the length of n, which would be 10. Okay. And I forgot my colon. And what I want to do is I want to take the item at position I, convert it into an int, and put it back into my list, which is called n at position I. So I'm going to change n sub I, and I'm going to change it to the integer value of n sub I. Okay? And then when I get done with that, I'm going to print n. And this time we should get a list of integers. Okay, so it wants me to input some numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Enter. And so I get a string with spaces separating everything. Then I split the string, and I get 10 shorter strings. And then I step through and I replace each item here with its integer value. Okay, so this is another way to do exactly what I did up here, except I think this is a lot more work. But it does demonstrate a couple of things. It demonstrates using the split function, which is a very useful function. Split will always give me a list of strings, and the strings will be whatever was separated by white space in the original string. And then this, you can't do that with a string. You can't step through a string and change the individual components of a string because strings are immutable in Python. You are not allowed to change them. But lists are not. You can change the value of an item at a given position in a list. So I'm going to go to position 0, take that one string that's there, and I'm going to convert it into an int number 1. I'm going to put it back in position 0. Okay. Now, if I were to go here, this is kind of interesting. Let's do this. Let's print n every time. And so I'm going to print it out 10 times. And what you'll see is the first time I print it out, I'll have a 1 integer and then strings from 2 to 10. The next time I'll have a 1 and 2 for integers and then strings from 3 to 10 and so on. So let's go ahead and run that. And I got to put in my numbers again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's going to blow up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And hit enter. Okay. And let's make this a little bit taller now so we can see what was happening. So I convert this into an int, but everything else still remains to be done until I make the second pass through the loop. Then I've converted 2 items. And on the next pass, I've converted this one. And the next pass, I've converted the 4. And then I convert the 5 and so on, all the way up until everything has been converted. My last print statement in the loop will happen after I've converted everything to an integer, and then I print everything one more time after I get outside the loop. So that's why it all occurs twice down there at the bottom. So that's the second print statement there. Okay, so either one of those will work. I think the first one is easier, but either one works. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to cancel or comment that out. And I'm going to go up here and I'm going to uncomment that. Whoops. Okay. So now I've got my numbers. And then what I want to do is I want to print out the minimum. Okay, I call them scores in the homework assignment. I am going to copy that code so I don't have to type it in again. Control C, and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to do that. And I called it scores. Let's change it to numbers. I'll take these lines right here and I'll do a find and replace. And I want to find scores and I want to replace it with numbers. And I want to replace all. Okay. Now I've got to write some functions. So the convention is to put the functions at the top. before anything else. So let's write min. Okay, list min. So I need to define a function name. It's going to be list min. And I'm going to pass in a list. And I'll call it scores again. And no, I'll call it a list. What I'm going to pass in is something called numbers. But a list is a placeholder. The names do not have to match up. So I want to find the lowest one on the list. And the instruction said that we can't assume that the number is going to be positive. So it could be a very large negative number. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my min, I'll call it minimum, equals the first item on the list, which would be item sub 0. Okay. So now I've got an item off of the list. If it's positive, it's negative, doesn't matter. It's on the list. And if it is the smallest one on the list, great. If not, I'll compare with some other ones and I will replace it. So now I'm going to go for I in a list. Check to see if I is less than minimum. And if it is, then I want to copy that over to minimum. And when I get all done, I want to return minimum. Okay, so we should be able to test our program now, but I'm going to have to comment these 3 lines out because I haven't written that code yet. So let's go ahead and run the code, and the minimum of that list should be 1. But I got to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And the minimum number is 1. Okay. Now let's do list max. And list max is going to be almost identical. Except I'm going to call it maximum, obviously, instead of minimum. Otherwise, it's kind of misleading. And that's going to be the first item on the list. And then for each item in a list, if I is greater than maximum, then I want to save I in maximum. And when I'm all done, I want to return. Okay. Now, one thing you might be wondering about here is this steps through, I've got 10 elements in my list. This steps through all 10 of them. And I really didn't need to do that because I've already looked at item number 0. I could have had this go from 1, start at 1, and go up to the last item in the list. But since it's only replacing one item, and this code is a little bit cleaner, the alternative would have been to do something like this. For I in range 1, comma, the length of the list, a list, plus 1. And since now I is taking on an index value, it's a number from 0 through 9, actually 1 through 9 in this case. Actually, I don't need that plus 1 because the length is going to be 10. So that'll go up and stop before I get to 10. But now I need to access the item explicitly by using a subscript. So if a list sub I is greater than minimum, then, I'm sorry, I'm doing min, less than minimum here. I have my arrow going the other way. Minimum equals a list sub I, okay? And then when I get all done, I'll return minimum again. But, so this one saves me the trouble of actually checking that item at position 0 a second time. This one, causes me to check the item at position 0 a second time. So it's going to be a little bit less efficient. But I just like the cleanness of the code. So I am not going to do it this way. I'm going to waste a little bit of CPU time and check that first item twice. Same thing down here. So that'll give me the minimum, that'll give me the maximum. If I had left the variable names the same here, which would be misleading. But if I had, the only difference between these two is that I've got the arrow turned the other way to find the maximum versus finding the minimum. Okay. One of the options or requirements was to write a function called list_sum, which would give me the sum of the items on the list. Okay, I'm not sure how I end up on that other line there, but let's... So if I want to sum the items on the list, before it starts, my total is 0. Okay. And then, as I go through the list, I want to add each item onto my total. So for I in range, I'm sorry, not range, we'll just in a list, and it'll take on every integer. It'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. What I want to do is I want to add that onto the total. So total plus equals I. And then when I get done, I'm just going to do return total. Okay, and the sum of all the numbers up from 1 to 10 is going to be 55. So let's go ahead and run that. The min should be 1, the max should be 10, and the sum should be 55. Okay, let's run it. Got to type in my numbers again. So the min is 1, the max is 10, the sum is 55. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. And now we've got one more to write, and it's called list average. So let's define a function called list average, and we'll pass in a list. So what I want to do is I want to find the average. I've got to take the sum of the numbers in the list and divide by the count of the items in the list. And fortunately, I already have a way to get the sum. So I'm just going to return list_sum. I can call a function from within a function. That will return the sum, 55 in this case. Now I divide it by the number of items on the list. I've got a function to do that for me. That's a built-in function. Okay. So one line. That's all I need here. I don't have to redo the sum again. I don't have to count the lines on the list because length will tell me what it is. And now let's go down here and uncomment that. And the average should be 5.5. So let's go ahead and run that. And let's put in our numbers. And the average is 5.5, like we expected it to be. So that is what you needed to do for the list exercises for the homework assignment.